Yeah, welcome. So the topic we'll be discussing in this lecture is interrupt driven IO. As we have discussed in the last lecture, there are three types of IO. The IO can happen in three ways. Okay. The first method is program driven IO or programmed IO. The second is interrupt driven IO, and the third is DMA, direct memory access. So the topic of today's session will be interrupt driven IO. So first let us have a brief overview of that. Of course, we have discussed that in the last class. So if you recollect, in programmed IO, the processor will give an IO command, it will issue an IO command, and then it will keep on wait for that IO to complete. Okay. But in contrast with that, in interrupt driven IO, the processor will issue an IO command and then it will start doing its other job. If there is some other process it has to attend, it will attend that. Once that IO is completed, the respective IO module will generate an interrupt to the processor. Okay, and then again the processor will come back to this particular IO module and get the result. Okay, and then it will proceed. Okay, so this is the whole principle in which interrupt driven IO works. So this flowchart clearly explains this. Here you can see the CPU is issuing a read command. Say any command, it can be either read or write. Let us assume CPU is issuing a read command to the IO module. So the command is given by whom? CPU. To whom? To the IO module, right? But after giving the command, CPU is not waiting. It is started to do something else. It is started to do something else. Okay, and there is no connection between this. You see here, if you see, there is a connection because immediately after that CPU is keep on checking whether the IO is completed or not. But in interrupt driven IO, that is not the case. The CPU issues the command and then it is started doing its other job. Okay, then after a period of time the IO will complete, right? The moment IO got completed, IO will give an signal. There is some signal sent to CPU from IO. IO is sending something to CPU. What signal it is sending? It is sending an interrupt. IO is creating an interrupt. The IO module, the respective IO module is interrupting the CPU. Okay. After receiving that interrupt, what CPU will do? CPU will stop whatever the act it is doing. Okay, and then it will read the status of the IO module. It checks the status. First it reads and then it checks the status whether it is completed or not. If it is ready, okay, sometimes it may be error. Okay, if it is error, it will stop there, it will exit. Suppose the IO is successfully completed, then it means that it is ready. Okay, now the result is available in the IO module. So the CPU is reading that, read the word from the IO module. Okay, or you can say that CPU will place a request. CPU got the interrupt stating that IO is completed. Okay, and then CPU will place a, and then it, and the IO module, I mean the CPU checks whether the status is ready or not. It's ready. Okay, now the CPU may place a request. Okay, IO is completed, give me the data. Like that it may ask, because the command is issue, the command is read command, right? Okay, so now the data which is available in the data register of the IO module, data where it is available, it is in the way it is available in the data register of the IO module. Now this IO module may take the data and keep it in the data bus. So this is the data bus. IO module may take the data and keep it in the data bus. Okay, this data may come into the data bus. Okay, right? Once it comes to the data bus, then so that here it is mentioned like this. You can see here in the diagram, you can see it is mentioned IO to CPU. It means whatever the data that was read, that is transferred to the CPU through the data bus. Okay, after reaching to the CPU, what CPU will do? CPU will write that to the memory location. Okay, then the processor checks, we want to do only one read operation, is that completed or not? If it is completed, then it will go to the next instruction. Okay, if it want to read something else, say it want to read continuously 4 blocks, now it has read only one block. then remaining three blocks are there. So in that case the read is not fully completed. So in that case it will be no. In that case it will go back and issue the read command to read from the next block. Okay, I think this is clear. So this is how interrupt driven IO works. That is, it will issue a command and then it will start doing something else, and once that IO operation is completed, the IO device will interrupt the CPU. The CPU will come back and check the status. If it is ready, if the data is ready, then the CPU will request the IO device to give back the data, and the IO device will place the data in the data bus. Through data bus, the data will reach the CPU. CPU will finally store that to memory. Okay. If the read is fully completed, move on to the next instruction. Otherwise, read the next byte or next word or next block, whatever it may be. Right. So this is the concept of interrupt driven IO. Fine. So why we are going for interrupt driven IO? Because there is a problem with programmed IO. What is the problem? The processor has to wait for a long time until the IO is completed. Okay, that is the problem. Because of this, we are going for an alternative approach, and that is interrupt driven IO. Okay, here the processor will just issue an IO command and it need not wait. It can start doing some other useful work. Okay, right. Once the IO operation is completed, the IO module will interrupt the processor to to inform that the data is ready. So whenever, and then the processor will request to share the data. Okay, right, and then the data will be shared to the processor through the data bus, and now uh, the processor can now finally write the data to the main memory. After writing the data to the main memory, then it will resume its former processing. What does it mean? What does it mean? See, we actually you should have very much clarity. Assume that resume the former processing means before the interrupt, CPU is doing something else, right? So after reading the data and writing to the memory, it will continue to do that particular process uh, which it was doing before the interrupt. Okay, that is called as formal processing. Okay, fine. So to have a better clarity, let us assume like this. Say initially CPU is executing a process P1. Okay, so it is executing for some time, right? But at one particular time, say the process P1 is want to perform an IO operation. P1 want to perform an IO operation. Okay. Now the CPU, what it will do, it will issue an IO command. It will issue an IO command, but it is not going to wait for the IO to complete. It is not going to wait for the IO to complete. IO may take a much time. Okay. So, so after issuing the IO command, this process P1 will be kept in waiting state. Okay. This process P1 will be kept in waiting state. Okay, or you can call it as IO wait state. Until IO is completed, this process cannot proceed further. So it will be moved to the what you call waiting queue. Waiting queue. Okay. In operating system, you can recollect. It will be moved to the waiting queue. Okay. So after issuing the IO command, this process P1 will move to the waiting state, and CPU will start executing process 2. So now CPU is executing process 2. Okay. Right. Say it is executing process 2 for certain amount of time. But meanwhile, if the IO is completed, if the IO operation for P1 is completed, then CPU will receive an interrupt. CPU will receive an interrupt from the IO module that previously whatever the IO you requested, it is completed. Okay. Now what CPU will do? Now CPU will keep P2 in waiting state. Now it will keep P2 in waiting state. Okay. And it will move P1 to ready state. Okay. If it is in ready state, then obviously it will come to running state also after some times. Okay. So let us assume that now P1 will come to running state. That is, now the CPU will start executing P1. Okay, because the data is available. Okay. So the CPU know that the data is available. So it will request the IO module to share the data. Now the IO module will place the data in the data bus. CPU will get the data and it will write to the memory location. Okay. Right. Now say that after some times this job P1 is totally completed. It is finished. So if P1 is finished executing, if if it is waiting for that only for that memory IO operation to complete, then after that its job is done, it is finished. Okay, now once again P2 is pending, right? So once again what CPU will do, CPU will move this P2 from waiting state to ready state or running state, and now CPU will start executing P2. Okay, so this is what is mean here. The processor executes the data transfer, that is after performing the data transfer from IO device to memory, and resumes its further processing, former processing. After that it will continue to execute the previous job whatever it is executing, right? Okay, so this is the whole scenario this which is happening with interrupt driven IO. Okay, fine. Okay, so in interrupt driven IO, if you see like how we have discussed earlier, the previous example, if processor is currently executing P1 and P1 requests an IO operation, okay, then P1 will be put up in wait state. P1 will be put up in wait state. Okay, P1 will put up in wait state, right? Then again what will happen? P2 processor will start executing P2, but after executing P2 for some amount of time, say the processor is receiving an interrupt stating that IO is completed. Now what the processor should do? Now the processor should put P2 in waiting state and it should load P1. Okay, but whenever the processor keeps something in waiting state, it is not just a matter of keeping in waiting state. All the all the status information about the process should be stored. Where it should be stored? It should be stored in the stack. Okay, so before putting P1 in wait state or P2 in wait state, all its status information should be stored. So the status information includes what? The status information include something called as PSW, program status word, which contains the full information about that particular, or process status word, which contains the full information about that particular process. Like we, does it has opened any file or any IO device it is also, it is accessing. Full details about that particular process will be available in PSW. So this should be pushed into the stack. And the content of PC, because till now you are executing P2, so PC will contain the next instruction of P2, that should be executed. So that should be pushed into the stack. Okay, because after sometimes again you will resume P2. Resume means you will start executing P2. Then it should start from where? It should start from the instruction. It should start from the instruction following the instruction by which you have stopped executing P2. Okay, right? If you put P2 when P2 is executing instruction 10, okay, so P2 was put in wait state after executing instruction 10, then it should continue with which instruction 11, and this information is available where in PC program counter. So this should be also pushed into the stack. Okay, if there are any other state information about the process, that particular process, if any other local variables or any other information which will decide the state of the process, if any other state in the sense to which will help to understand the current situation of that process, all such information also should be pushed into the stack. Process state information, okay, we'll call it as process. Here it is there, process state information. All these should be pushed into stack. Then only you can keep a process in a waiting state. Then only you can keep a process in the waiting state. Okay, now if P2 is executing, meanwhile if an interrupt is received stating that IO is completed, now you have to put P2 in wait state. But before keeping P2 in wait, you have to do all these things. All these things should be pushed into the stack. Okay, then P1 will be loaded. Again, loading P1 means what? Loading P1 means what? Like how while putting P2 in wait state we are pushing all these things. Similarly, while pushing P1 also, I mean while making P2 in wait, we are pushing all these things to the stack. Similarly, before making P1 wait also, the operating system might have pushed its program status word, its PC, its process state information, everything into the stack. That should be restored. Okay, that should be restored. Then only you can resume P1. So whatever the PSW, program status word, program counter and process state information related to the process P1, all these should be restored. Okay. So once it is restored, it means that now now CPU can execute P1 from where it has left previously. Okay. Or it can execute P1 immediately after the instruction from where it has left previously. Okay. Right. So this is what is shown in this flowchart. Okay, this flowchart, what it shows in the sense, assume that initially P1 is executing. Meanwhile, P1 creates an IO wait. I mean P1 creates a request an IO operation. So CPU issues an IO command. But after issuing the IO command, CPU want to move to some other process P2. In that case, P1 should be in wait state. So to keep P1 in wait, all the information about P1 are pushed into stack, like program status word, PC and process state information, everything were pushed into stack. Okay, and process start executing P2. But after executing P2 for some times there is an interrupt which says that the IO operation for the process P1 is completed. Now CPU should go back there, but it cannot go back just like that. It should put P2 in wait state. Before that, it should push the PSW, PC and process state information corresponding to P2 into stack. Okay. So then P2 will get into wait state. Now it should start executing P1. Now the processor should start executing P1. For that it has to load. It should load the program status word PC, the content of program counter and process state information of P1. It should load those informations of P1 back to the memory. Okay, then back to the respective registers. That is PSW will come to program status word register. The old content of PC which is in stack will come to PC. Like that, respective thing will come to the respective register. Once that is done, CPU can start resuming executing P1. Okay, right? So that is what shown in this diagram. Okay, so this diagram, what it shown in the sense after the interrupt. Initially P1 is executing and there is a it is requesting an IO operation. It is requesting an IO operation. So P1 was kept in waiting state by pushing all its program status word, PC and other information to the stack. And CPU started executing P2, but meanwhile it is receiving an interrupt. Okay. So once this interrupt is received, what is happening? That's what this flowchart shows. Simple interrupt processing. Okay. So who is creating that interrupt? IO module is creating the interrupt. That is, IO module can also be called as IO controller or device controller. Okay. So device controller or other system hardware issues an interrupt. Okay. So let us assume it processor receives an interrupt when it is executing P2. So then what the processor will do? Processor will finish executing the current instruction. So when the interrupt is received, assume that processor is executing instruction 10. So instruction 10, it is in the partial execution. Okay. So it cannot stop that. So it will finish executing that particular instruction. Okay. Processor will finish executing the instruction 10. After executing the instruction 10, what it will do? Processor signals an acknowledgement of interrupt. It will send the acknowledgement to the IO module stating that okay, I have received your interrupt. I understood that IO is completed. Like that, it will send an acknowledgement. Okay. After that, what it is doing? Processor pushes PSW and PC onto control stack. There is something called as control stack. To that, whose PSW and PC? P2's PSW and PC will be pushed into the control stack. Okay, right? And processor loads the new PC value based on the interrupt. Okay. So now whatever there is an interrupt, right? So whenever there is an interrupt, the respective interrupt service routine should be executed, right? So processor will load the address of that interrupt service routine, okay, into the PC and it will execute the interrupt, right? After that, processor will also push the remainder of the process state information. if there is any other state information related to P2, that will also be pushed into the stack. Okay, so once all these things were done, now P2 is interrupted. Here interrupted in the sense process interrupt. It means P2 is stopped. Okay, it means it is in the hold stage. Okay, it is stopped because currently P2 is executing, so that is interrupted. Okay, right. Now the CPU should start executing P1. For that it should restore the process state information. Okay, so originally it was executing P1 when the IO was raised, so it will restore that particular process state information, and also it will restore the old PSW and PC of P1, right? So these are the sequence of steps happen when there is an interrupt occurs after completing the IO operation. Okay, fine. So this flowchart again, it shows the same thing. uh, uh, it's not the flowchart. It shows the memory, uh, the changes that is happening in the memory after this interrupt. That is, when an IO is completed, there will be an interrupt, right? So when that interrupt happens, what are the changes in the memory that is happening? That is what this particular diagram shows. Okay, so what it shows in the sense, assume that currently some particular process is executing. We don't know which process. Okay, say, but this is not the one which created the interrupt. Okay, there's something else which created the interrupt. Okay, so currently CPU is executing this instruction, nth instruction. So what will be in the program counter? Program counter will always hold the address of the next instruction. So you can see here program counter is here, n plus 1 is in program counter. Yes, this is the next instruction supposed to be executed. Okay, but what is happening while executing instruction n, CPU is receiving an interrupt. This diagram is based on that. Okay, while executing instruction n, CPU is receiving an interrupt. So what CPU should do? It should complete executing the instruction n. Okay, processor finishes execution of the current instruction. Okay, because in middle of instruction 10, instruction n, it is getting an interrupt, so it will finish executing interrupt n. Okay, sorry, instruction n, it will finish executing instruction n, right? Then what it should do? It should store PSW to stack and PC to stack. Okay, so PSW and all the content of the registers. So one of the register here is PSW, program status word. It's a special purpose register, it's not a general purpose register, but inside the processor. So this is the processor, right? So processor also contains PSW. So the content of PSW, all general purpose register, program counter, all these were pushed into stack. Okay, previously stack top is T. After pushing all these things, the content of general purpose register, PSW and program counter, the new stack top stop becomes T minus M. The new stack top becomes T minus 1, T minus M. Okay, so you recall where stack grows from higher address to lower address, which we have discussed sometimes earlier. Okay, so currently if stack top stop is T, after pushing these items, stack top becomes T minus M. Okay, now there is an interrupt. Whenever there is an interrupt, what should be executed? Interrupt service routine should be executed. Let us say interrupt service routine is available at this part of memory, starting with address y to y plus l. The starting address of the interrupt service routine is y. The ending address is y plus l. Okay, so now this should be executed. So this address of y, this whatever this address where y represents, that should go into program counter. Okay, so that this y is getting into program counter. Are you getting right? So now this interrupt service routine will execute. Okay, now this interrupt service routine will execute. Okay, and the interrupt will be served, and the interrupt will be served, right? Okay, and also note this, the new stack top becomes what? T minus M. So stack pointer is the one which always points to the stack top. Stack pointer is the one which always points to the stack top. Okay, so stack pointer is previously stack pointer is T, now it is updated with T minus M. Okay, now the interrupt service routine is executing and it serves the interrupt, whatever the job, I mean whatever the interrupt service routine, in the sense what it will do, it will move the content of the, it will move the content whatever the CPU has requested an IO operation, right? That data is available in the data register, that it will move it to the memory, right? Once that is completed, again CPU should resume this process, right? Whatever the process it has kept in pending, it should start executing, right? How it will start executing that? So whatever pushed in the stack, it should be reloaded into processor. Okay, so what will happen now, that is happening in this diagram. Previously whatever has been pushed, like PSW, general purpose register, all these are again reloaded back to their respective register. The content of program counter is also reloaded. Okay, once this is done, now the stack size will reduce from t minus m to t. Okay, so now stack becomes what? Previously stack is t minus m, now it will become t. Now t will become the new stack, I mean top of the stack. So stack pointer will always hold the address of the top of the stack. Okay, and now what will be in program counter? It will be n plus 1, n plus 1, because previously when interrupt occurred, at that time it was executing which instruction? Nth instruction. Okay, so now program counter is n plus 1, so it will start executing from n plus 1th instruction, right? Okay, so this is how interrupts are handled uh, uh, through interrupt driven IO. Okay, it's a general interrupt service routine which we have discussed several times. Okay, I think it's clear, right? Now there are two design issues with respect to the implementation of interrupt driven IO. What are they? The first design issue is that, see, we have multiple IO modules. We have multiple IO modules. The question is how the processor will determine which device is issuing an interrupt. We have multiple IO module, and each IO module can have multiple devices. Okay, so when there is an interrupt stating that a particular operation is completed, how the processor will know that, which device is issuing the interrupt. Okay, this is one question, one issue. Second issue is, if more than one interrupt occur at the same time, okay, then how the processor should decide like which one to process first. Okay, first question is what? Say there is one particular line for interrupt. All devices, you may have many IO modules, but all the IO modules are connected to one line. Okay, whenever there is an what you call, whenever an IO operation is completed, they will just enable this particular line. They will just enable this particular bus, IO completed, like that. Okay, now CPU is in the other end. CPU is in the other end. Okay, CPU is in the other end. How the CPU, whenever there is a signal received in this line that stating that IO is completed, how the CPU will know that this IO completion interrupt, IO completion is an interrupt, right? It is coming from which device? How it will understand? That is first question. Second question is, say that at a point of time, two devices, two IO devices, say device 1 and device 2, both these devices are completing an IO operation at the same time, and they are enabling this line at the same time, IO complete at the same time. Okay, same time in the sense with a little difference. Okay, say this one is sending first, and immediately this one is also sending. Now in what order the CPU should process? These are the two design issues and how to handle that. Okay, so there are several ways to handle that. There are basically four ways or to handle that. Each one of them have their own advantage and disadvantage. The first method says that provide multiple interrupt lines, which means that don't use only one interrupt line. So previously we have said that all the IO module will share one common interrupt line, but the first method says that use multiple interrupt line. That is if the CPU is this, and these are the IO module, then each of the IO module will be connected with the CPU with a separate interrupt line. Okay, if any interrupt is raised by, say this is module 1, this is module 2, this is module 3, this is module 4. If any interrupt is raised by module 1, it will be through this line. Module 2 it will be this through this line. Module 3 it will be through this line. Module 4 through this line. Again each IO module is having different IO devices. Okay, so that is different issue. But now at least processor can understand the IO, I mean the interrupt is coming from which module. Okay, after that it is up to the module to identify which device is creating interrupt. It will have some method for that. Okay, so then it can identify which device has created interrupt, and processor can access that, I mean that particular module, and identify which device has created interrupt. Okay, so the first method says that use multiple interrupt lines. That is, for different IO modules use different interrupt lines. Okay, this is a very simple and straightforward technique, but implementing this in practical is very difficult, because you cannot have different lines for different IO modules. It is highly impractical. Okay, or sometimes it may so happen that, okay, even if you have multiple lines, okay, sometimes it may so happen that maybe all these 4 lines may be connected with different IO modules, but you may have one line which is connected with 2 modules. You may have one lines which is connected with 2 modules, something like this. So this is one module, fifth module. Fifth module is connected with sixth module. Okay, it is not directly connected with CPU. Now both fifth and sixth IO module will use this same line to generate an interrupt. Now how the CPU will understand whether it is coming from the fifth module or from the sixth module. So such issues will happen with multiple interrupt lines, and mainly it is impractical to have that many interrupt lines. But this is a very simple and straightforward technique. Okay, so but in the real time using this is difficult, right? So even if multiple interrupt line is used, we may face some issue like this. That is, one line may be connected to more than one IO module, right? It is likely that each line will have multiple IO modules attached to it. Okay, so finally multiple interrupt lines should also depend on other techniques, okay. So what are the other techniques that we will discuss? Okay, the second technique is software pool. So this technique, what it says in the sense, it's a very simple technique. This technique, what it says in the sense, uh, say for example, this is the CPU. Okay, we have a common interrupt line for all IO modules. Any IO module should use this line only. Say you have many IO modules, say IO module 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 10 or 20, whatever it may be. And each IO module contain multiple IO devices. All these are there. Okay, right? So all these, I mean, all IO modules are connected through one interrupt line. Okay, right? Now, when there is any interrupt is enabled, when an interrupt is created, CPU will only understand that some IO is completed, but which IO completed CPU does not know. So software polling technique, what it says in the sense, CPU should check, like one by one device, one by one IO module, whether this has created an interrupt. Like that it should check. Okay, then if it is not, then it should check the other device whether this has created the interrupt. Yes or no? No. Whether this has created the interrupt? No. Whether this has created the interrupt? No. Whether this has created the interrupt? Yes. Again, which device has created the interrupt? That IO module will identify, and it will specify, inform to the CPU through the status register. Okay, through the status register, CPU can understand which IO device of this module has created the interrupt. Okay, right? So this technique is called a software poll. This is actually, it's a very time consuming technique. When processor detects an interrupt, it branches to an interrupt service routine. Okay, it executes an interrupt service routine. The job of that interrupt service routine is to poll each IO module. Poll means check. To check each IO module to determine which module caused the interrupt. But it's a very time consuming technique. Okay. See, for example, in multiple interrupt lines, you have different interrupt lines for different IO module. Okay, but for one of the IO module, you are using one interrupt line is shared between 2 modules. In that case, for example, if CPU gets an interrupt from this particular line, how it will identify whether it is from IO module 1 or 2? Again, here also it should use polling. Okay, CPU will call an interrupt service routine. That interrupt service routine will check whether the interrupt was raised by this device or that device. Okay, so that we have discussed while discussing multiple interrupt lines that you cannot implement multiple interrupt line technique as a standalone technique. It should be combined with any one of the other techniques. Okay, right. So that is what about second technique, which is software poll. The problem with this technique is it is time consuming. The third technique is daisy chain or hardware poll. It is also called as vectored interrupt. It is also called as vectored interrupt. Okay, so what is that? See, daisy chain means one device connected to other device. That concept is called as daisy chain. Like that, it may go for any level. Like that, it may go for any level. Here, what we'll have in the sense, there will be one interrupt line. CPU will be connected with one of the IO module through one interrupt line. Okay, through one interrupt line. Say this is IO module 1. This is IO module 1. CPU is connected through to, sorry, say this is CPU. Okay, CPU is connected with one of the IO module, say module 1. I'll call it as module 1. I'm not writing IO, it's actually IO module. Say we'll call it as module 1. Okay, we'll call it as module 1. Now the other devices, how it will be connected in the sense, so this module is connected through CPU through the interrupt line. The other modules are daisy chain. Daisy chain means module M2 will be connected with M1. Okay, so in M1 there will be multiple lines available. This is called as daisy chain. In M1, if there are 4 lines available, 4 cables available, then 4 modules can be connected with M1, 4 IO modules. Other than M1, 4 modules can be connected. So M3, this is another IO module. M4, this is another IO module. Okay, but all these are in turn connected with M1. Okay, this chain may go for any length. There is no restriction on that. It depends. Okay, but all these are what IO module. IO module 1 is connected directly, but IO module 2, 3, 4 and 5, all these are daisy chained. This concept is called as daisy chain. Here daisy chain is there, no? This is called as daisy chain. Okay, if this daisy chain kind of setup is there, then what will happen in the sense, assume that one of the device is creating an interrupt. Okay, assume that device 3 is creating an interrupt. Okay, so it is creating an interrupt through this line. CPU knows that some device has created the interrupt, but which device has created the interrupt, what is the address of that device, all these things CPU does not know. Okay, now what CPU will do, CPU will the CPU will send an acknowledgement signal. The CPU will send an interrupt acknowledgement signal back as a reply. It will send an interrupt acknowledgement signal. Okay, this acknowledgement will reach all devices in the correct order. I mean, first the acknowledgement will go to M1. So M1 will check. If M1 has created the interrupt, then M1 will keep its address in this bus. There will be a bus also here. You can say there is a data bus here. So in the data bus, M1 will keep its address, which means that I have only created the interrupt. But actually now M1 has not created the interrupt, so M1 will not do anything. Then that acknowledgement will go to M2, because in the order first M1 is there, so the acknowledgement will first it will be received by M1. Okay, then it goes to M2. Now if M2 is the one which created the interrupt, it will keep its address in the data bus. The M2 has not created the interrupt. Now it goes to M3. If M3 is the one which created the interrupt, it will keep its address in the data bus. Yes, M3 is the one which created the interrupt. Let us assume the address of M3 is 003. Now that 003 will reach the CPU. Now CPU will understand that this is the device which created the interrupt. Okay, and it will call the appropriate interrupt service routine. That's it. Okay, but say if more than one device is creating an interrupt. Okay, say M3 and M5 is creating the interrupt at the same time. Now also an interrupt signal is received in the CPU. Okay, again CPU will send what? Acknowledgement it will send. M1 will not reply, M2 will not reply, M3 will reply. M3 will send its address 003. M4 will not reply. After some time, M5 will also send its address 005. But there will be some gap between M3 and M5. Okay. So CPU will understand that two interrupts were created. That is, two IO modules has completed some IO operation. Okay. So first CPU will call the interrupt service routine corresponding to 003. I mean corresponding to M3 IO module 3. Next it will call the interrupt service routine corresponding to IO module 5. Okay, right? So this technique is called as daisy chain or hardware pole or vectored interrupt. Okay, why we are calling as vector means this it is keeping this its address in the data bus. So that address, as it is, instead of calling it as address, instead of keeping an address, it can also keep a vector. A vector is a unique number to identify that device. A vector is a unique number to identify that device. Okay, so it is otherwise called as vectored interrupt. Okay, right? So the interrupt acknowledgement line is a daisy chained through the modules, right? Vector, that is address of the IO modules or some other unique identifier, will be passed by the IO module back to the CPU. Processor uses the vector as a pointer to the appropriate device service routine. Based on this address or the vector, so this can be called as either address or vector. Based on that, CPU will call the appropriate ISP. Okay, avoiding the need to execute a general interrupt service routine first. Okay, you need not execute any general interrupt service routine. In software pole only you will execute a general interrupt service routine, which will check all IO devices one by one who has created the interrupt, like that. Okay, but here it's a hardware signal. This acknowledgement goes to everybody. Whoever created the interrupt alone, they alone will be responding, right? So this is what daisy chain technique is about. The third technique is bus arbitration. Bus arbitration, this is actually, it's a very simple technique. What it says in the sense, uh, CPU is here. Okay, CPU is connected to different IO module through a common bus. Through this bus only they have to send the what do you call, interrupt signal. Okay, so there are many IO modules, IO module 1 2 3 4 5 6, all these things are there. Okay, right, there are multiple IO modules. Okay, fine. And to the each IO module we have multiple IO devices. Okay, now say that one of the IO device has one of the IO module has created an uh, interrupt. Okay, which means that it's one of the IO device has completed the IO operation, so it is informing to the CPU through an interrupt. But before that it is not, no device can just like that create an interrupt here. In case of bus arbitration methodology, no device can just like that create an interrupt to the CPU. Before creating the interrupt, they should claim the bus. Before creating the interrupt, they should get the bus. Okay, say this is module 1, IO module 1, this is IO module 2, this is IO module 3, this is IO module 4. Say IO module 2 has completed, one of the IO device in IO module 2 has completed some IO operation. So module 2 want to tell to CPU through an interrupt. It want to generate an interrupt to the CPU. But it cannot generate an interrupt just like that. First it should request the bus to the CPU. So that is called as bus arbitration. It should request the bus to the CPU to generate the interrupt. So that is called as bus request. It should request the bus. Okay. Now CPU may provide the bus or it may not provide the bus. That depends on several factors. Maybe priority or so many things. Okay. But let us assume that CPU has given the bus. Then CPU may respond with bus grant. Then CPU request bus. Then CPU may respond with bus grant. It means it has granted the bus to module 2. Okay, now after getting the bus, module 2 can respond. Okay, respond with the interrupt request. Okay, but with this technique, what happens? Only one device can create the interrupt at one time. Okay, and CPU knows that who is holding the bus. CPU knows that bus is with module 2. So if interrupt is coming from module 2. That's it. Okay, so So the technique says that an IO module must first gain control of the bus before it can raise the interrupt. When the processor detects the interrupt, it responds on the interrupt acknowledgement line. When the processor sees the interrupt, it will obviously send an acknowledgement signal through the same line, and it knows who is that module, which module has created the interrupt. Okay, right? Then the requesting module places its vector on the data line. Okay, after sending the request, after first the module claims the bus, then the CPU will send an acknowledgement, then the requested module will place its vector or its address in the data bus. Through that vector or address, CPU will call the appropriate interrupt service routine. Okay, so these two techniques are called as vectored techniques. Okay, daisy chain and bus arbitration. Right. So that's it about interrupt driven IO. Fine, let us stop here. Thank you.